Welcome here tonight for what promises to be a wonderful and unique night of memories, storytelling, recitations, music and song. We have people here tonight from all four corners of Ireland, from Donegal, from Belfast, from Monaghan, from Kilkenny, from Tips, from Kerry, and even from Cork. You are all most welcome.
Brazil!
You are all most welcome. And your attendance is most appreciated. If I might draw your attention to a few housekeeping matters. Emergency exits are located at the side and at the back of the theatre. If I could ask you to take a moment now, please, to ensure that your mobile phone is on silent or turned off. I'd ask that in the course of tonight's show, there be no audience photography or filming. We have an in-house photographer and videographer, and both the photographs and film will all be made available to you over the next few weeks. The first act tonight is approximately 1 hour long, at which point we'll have a short interval, 15 to 20 minutes, during which you can purchase refreshments from the cafe through the rear doors. The second act is about half an hour long, after which you'll all be most welcome to join us for after-show drinks across the road in Lawlers. Now the reason we chose Lawlers was because it is the only pub in Naas that Declan is not barred out of. Yes. Once again, please, no photography, no filming during tonight's production. And once again, many thanks for coming here tonight. And now, without further ado, we'll dim the lights, and I'll give to you James Tooher, Alex Hughes, and Francis T. Kirke in the world premiere of A Captive Audience.
Stars by the Common Street, large quarters, Mansfield, limping little down to slow black, crow black, fishing boat bobbing sea. The houses are bland as moles, though moles see fine tonight in this slouching velvet dindons. A blind as Captain Cat there in the muffled middle between the pump and the town clock. Shops in morning, the welfare home in Widow's Field, and all the people of the lovely and dumbfound town are sleeping.
You've been running too fast for me. Each day is but a moment. Enjoy the moments that you won't see. For though not we understand, the answers are so far from clear. Your time is still ahead, so be a child and stay. Just wait, your time you'll see. My childhood's gone, my sad tale. Hunger burns to grow where. Don't learn too fast. Childhood is come play the part of the drum. things he has grown up. They'll refuse you when you won't know why. But believe me, we know better. At least we like to think so at times. Where you dream of things like ice cream fountains. Snow, I kissed your lips as you went to sleep. But believe me, 'cause I know squawkers time will go and fade from memory.
And that lovely piece of music was composed by a friend of mine over 40 years ago, Jeremiah. Captain Violence. I love it. You know, some of you might have found it difficult to get in here tonight. Believe you me, it's a lot more difficult to get out. As a secondary school teacher, I knew one time I had to give up the job early on medical grounds. And when I retired myself, I asked her what she missed most of the job. And without hesitation, she said, the captain violence. I could relate to that. But for me, it went from the classroom into the staff room and beyond. I'd often make a dramatic entrance into the staff room at break time and announce myself with what my father might have called a bold statement, such as, lads, for God's sake, there's no one on the yard. It's chaos out there. They're hating each other. At which point, I have all eyes on the room on me immediately. That's the majority of ladies on my head. With forks and spoons suspended momentarily betwixt the bowl and the mouth. Only one young lady might continue relishing her mixed fruit salad, and addressing me without changing expression, say something like, well, that's no surprise, Sir Kirke. You're on duty. Oops, but I had my cat problems. You're all very welcome here tonight, even those who didn't want to come at all. Still, cat problems. What I have here for you tonight is what my brother-in-law would call a mixed bag. He's down there somewhere in the audience. He's a shopper. Whilst on holiday early in my retirement in Southeast Asia, I realised that I no longer had my captive audience. Whether that was in the classroom, in the staff room, in theatres, pubs, bars, even the street. I never grew up in the era of listening to recitations delivered spontaneously in licensed premises throughout the land, but my father did. And the words up there along the hillside, and down there, kept ringing in my ears, but without a context, without a frame, without a recitation. I stumbled across this position quite by accident. In 1981, I was appointed to a permanent teacher position in St. Joseph's Boys Primary School, Mount Crozier, Coast Cork. Immediately moved to live in the city and joined the Douglas Drama Group, where I got the part of Larry and Lennox Robinson's well-known play, Happy as Larry, wherein was the monologue. And on completion of the production, I was encouraged, by members of the group to deliver the piece at parties, ramps, soirees, whatever, whenever the occasion arose, or didn't. And for the next 15 years or more, continued to do so, invited or not. Other recitations then were recommended to me, and having found a niche with Larry, who delivered it, drunk or sober, at the drop of a hat, anytime, any place. Recitations such as Dangerous Dan McGrew by Robert Service, or The Cremation of Sandy P. John O'Brien with his Time Milan New or Seth Cameron. Seamus McIntyre with his I Heard the Thing Last Wednesday or The Irish Brussels style. And then there was Amy Kelly's Shelly Key style that was most familiar to me. And Milton Hayes with his Green Eye of the Little Yellow Dog. Both Service and O'Brien were well known for the recitations, and I'm sure that many of you out there will be familiar with them and be able to pick out that drop lines that I make in my delivery. I hope not. But whatever about the literary context of doing recitations, your captive audience was never guaranteed. It had to be aired, particularly in a well-lubricated, packed pub, and even more especially in a pub like O'Flaherty's of England, where the 3 fiddles, the 2 boxes, the 1 banjo, the five guitars, the 4 whistles, and all the borrows took silence momentarily to allow Francis Clean to do his bit. Even at that, a gap in the hedge had to be found, which amounted to a nod from Fergus to quieter at the end of the session. Now, there was no point in calling order. Only shock, treatment, work. And every pub where the matron gave, and the owner does an all-right trade. I know the knock 2, 3 or 4, that'll bring the body to open the door. Tuned down voice, an anxious eye. Up the empty street, there's the law lie, and down the passage into the snow, where the light is dimmed by the cigarette full. Half was all of poisonous stuff, and in the half-jam gathering stuff, till the unfamiliar. Quenches the light and stills the room, and only signals in the brown room are the cigarettes and the booming bedroom, and the only noise is the sigh of the drink as Jim pokes evidence down the thing. Then made the law will make an entry, starting in classic use of symmetry, no thread deliberate that stands, knowing the alibi in advance, making notes of fresh stains of stuff, and the simple teetotalers they lounge. Listening to the touchy tale of the friendly whiskey, stout and ale, all gratted, and the brandy ready for the invalid drinkers of battles with the hat was dead. The gems unfortunately disappears. Now, what here's the dictate, and she's a flooded here. If the license is endorsed once more, we can take the name from over the door. And the moves the records up in his head, money spent, the distance to bed, the chance of a fine, or a name in the news. Shut it off for the dose and work in the booze. And seeing the drooping bloodshot eye, the blackened nail and the nicotine dye, reads in advance the following day's log. The shattered head and the hair of the dog. And knows full well that next Saturday night we present his eyes in a similar sight.
This next song is an original song of mine, and it's about a man who liked all clothes and Shane McCauley. And I actually wrote it not far from Flaherty's, down in England, watching his funeral, and it was a very special day. So it's my observations on the day of his For Gilbert and Co, let us in from the cold, see you on for the road. All of your favorites from Finnegan's Wake, go there, even Joyce himself. Help people from this world, take it as well as you welcome the other one home. Your faith was strong, didn't need proof, not a drug for the some magic and a mystery crackled in the air that day. Your music and a mystery, some magic and a mystery crackled in the air that day. For silver my son, humor and wisdom to the last song. And the golden arrived with his belly unshowed. He winked out all for you too. As you lay in a wicker out peace, saying nothing, just whistling all of your charms. Right before we got up, then we danced to your fairy tale. Right by your side it was fell. Silver lining sun crackled in the air. Your humor and wisdom to the last song. You'll never fall from here, Adrian's wall, or the great south and good Lord you have. Your music and your mystery, magic and your mystery crackled in the air that day. Your music and your mystery, magic and your mystery crackled in the air that day. For silver my son, humor and wisdom to the last song. Silver my son, humor and wisdom to the last song. Everyone said we can trust with steadiness, love with extravagance, hope with unswerving resolve. We can trust with steadiness, love with extravagance, hope with eternal resolve. Trust with steadiness, love with extravagance, hope with eternal resolve. We can trust with steadiness, love with extravagance, hope with eternal resolve.
I wrote this story over 30 years ago. And there's a good chance now, I can't see, but there's a good chance that one of the main characters in the story is sitting there amongst you. And he may decide to reveal himself. He may reveal himself because he may well be the one laughing horse, and he may be the only one laughing at the end of the show. I remember my childhood well. When I was going to school, we sat around the beach on the birch. They were all on the go. Every master had his own particular technique, you see. And very often the geography of the school dictated his preference from amongst the wide variety of timber that might be available in the locale. We were unfortunate that our campus was situated right in the middle of a copse, surrounded on all sides by the most magnificent growths of every description. I'd say to as many lots and found the most devious candidates, while stalking out those big windows, watching the blackbird and the crow busily building their nest, only to be brought back down to earth by a quick lash of ash or oak on the inkwell whole desk in front of it, and a huge frame of the master blocking out the sunlight and chanting in it and making drill in the first place. Due into the availability, indeed the superfluity, of the aforementioned modesty, I needn't tell you that we saw plenty of shit, and every manner of means of its implementation imaginable. There was, for instance, one master who preferred to lodge his weapon in his back pocket, John Wayne style, and he was able to pick it out and land it on target before he would tell me, say, "'Twill be it all, sir." He preferred to pick at the sally game. The headmaster, of course, would have nothing but oak, and his stick to pride a place at the edge of his big pine desk, the edge of which sticky out to get ready for all occasions. With hope, as many the short-sighted hero tried to pick hide the sticks, but all to no avail. They were in plentiful supply. And if you were caught, our owners, the hand, the broke stick, the onus was on you then to procure a new one. And lest you pick an inferior model, be the guinea pig striker. Now this was the system in operation at the time of my going to school. And one did everything in one's power to avoid incurring the wrath of the master and the inevitable shit. Some fellows supposed seem to be immune to it and got slapped every day. But for the occasional offender, it was a terrible thing, and to be avoided at all costs. Now, there was a situation where the stick kept you on your toes, you say, for most of the time. But if something extemporaneous or came out of the blue might happen, it was often the case that even the best boys in the class would lose all sense of themselves, and the stick would be flying right, left, and centre. It might be a strange man coming to the door, or a pendulum travelling around. A mad dog maybe chasing a cat outside the window, or maybe a picture of Diana, a two fella who knows his or maybe even something as simple as a false thing. But if a deviation presented itself, or it was hard to resist it. And it was in such a situation that we found ourselves one Friday morning, and the master, in an awful rage, brought on by our inability to string three notes of the song together that seemed most impossibly heavy. But it was now 10, and we were no further along the line than we had been at Kirke. He had resorted to abandoning the lyrics altogether and replacing emphasizing the notes through the use of the letter A. The lyric in question was the word child, from the song The Old House, made famous by John Brown. Lonely I wandered through streets of my childhood, my childhood, And, he had tried every trick he knew. But, maybe it was the lyric itself was pushing us off, because we weren't having a great childhood at the time. But he sang, no response. No response. Every man on his disposal was exhausted. He played it on the dentistry, he played it on the record. He tried tonic solfa, he tried staff notation. He tried using the tuning fork. He might have done better with the big fork. He was looking out like his head might have burst. And developing his style and concussions. When the door flew open, and in walked the parish priest. Now, had it been anybody else, you might have had a huge sigh of relief. But see, himself stood there tall in his long black cassock, and a queer hat on his head, only made matters worse. A wash, says he, no introduction or anything else. I need 2 old boys initially to serve a wedding mass. Well, indeed, transformation now was marvelous. Here now before us stood Santa Claus and Moses all wrapped up in one. The giver and the deliverer. He stayed for an hour, and more important than that, cash in hand. For as well as for a journey, you might get 2 bob or a half a crown, you could at least have for a wedding. Now those of us are all Christ, and our Chester pockets. And more be it happy smiles, as more as anything you would see in the picture Bible or a country wall. The rest of the boys looked on with moans again, wondering who would go, and shocked at the realization that they didn't work. Most of the old boys, you see, were towns, being freely available for early morning class, and only 1 or 2 came from the countryside. They considered themselves far more devout than their country counterparts for the commitment that they had given. And it might have been true, because the first name Naas called out was a parish butler who lived 3 miles from the town and bunted in and out every morning and afternoon. The second name he called out was mine. Oh, I can still remember the spinning in my head, and the nudge that fell on the desk next to me gave me flat out. But I was up like a shot and out the door after PD, and the PD training behind us. No, it wasn't as if he had to tell us what to do or anything like that. It wasn't as if neither of us had never served the wedding mass before. In fact, the only anomaly at such an occasion was the amount of cash that the best man delivered to the altar when the whole show was over, the sultans were hanging in the cupboard, and we waited patiently for his arrival in his arms. In due course, and arrived he did, and boy, was it worth the wait. Probably like half an hour, okay. 5 shillings, oh, nice one. 10 shillings, oh, out of the ordinary, and a pound, unbelievable. And a pound, and a pound each. We used to see everyone over the moon and hot-footed it back to school. Not that we were worried about being late or anything like that, but because of the excitement and the need to blow. He burst in the door and I followed him behind, having noticing the mass at the top of the room. There was no need for anyone to ask how we got up, because that was. But the mass would creep up behind me and he says, "Well, Francie, how did you get on? Pounds a night!" He knows but I hardly believe my own voice. Oh, he says, and it's slightly lower whisper. Oh, you said, between each as I'm in your street. And I could hear the swift intake of breath from the rest of the boys in the class, with the wonder and the awe of it all. I couldn't take my hand off. I couldn't take my mind off it, checking and rechecking. Was it still there? What would I do? Wait till I got home and told them all. Now, Buckley must have been in the same frame of mind. When the master says to him, "I have a problem here in the blackboard that none of your classmates can solve, and you, Buckley, now, you're my last hope." Well, the same fellow was top of the class, so it didn't bother me much whether he guessed it or not. I knew him, and it would be passed on to me. And then anyway, I was looking down at my precious phone note, not having a clue what was going on. And neither did Buckley, which was most unfortunate. Here now, Patsy, says the master, I have 3 A's in the blackboard. Can you tell me what's the difference between them? No, in actual fact, what the master held in the blackboard were 3 A's in the possessive situation of owning a coat in the Irish language, which translates as his coat, her coat, and their coat, which translates as a coat for a boy. We've put the small remote and written in an H. A coat for a girl. Be very sweet about it. Take your page. And a goatee for their coats. Put it in a G and make it for them all. Now, this I can assure you was only made clear to me in later years. And anyway, I wasn't even paying attention. I was looking down at my precious pound note, leaving the donkey walk to Buckley. "Here now," says the master. "Here now, Patsy," says the master. "Can you tell me what's the difference between the 3 A's?" I must have been looking down at my precious pound note, because I remember looking up at Buckley momentarily. With a kind of a relaxed kind of, a relaxed something. And, I had the clue. What was not a notion of what was going on. And neither did Buckley, but he didn't know that. And up each new cocksure. I watched up to see. The first one is the second one is and the third one is But the silence was the first indication to me that all was not well. I must have been looking down at my precious phone note, because I remember I was slowly coming back to the reality of class matters. But I remember looking up and having the feeling that I was in the presence of a very solemn occasion. Such as one might experience at a hanging or a funeral. I was. The master had his back on. I was doing something very private, with the upright on the blackboard and the front part of his forehead. We all thought, of course, maybe it was adjusting his glasses against the wind of the blackboard, or maybe that he had broken an A because his hands were clenched up tight in his chest like that. After That seemed like an eternity. He turned around, which had immediate and universal effect of triggering the ostrich syndrome. Put down your head, look straight at me, under no circumstances avert your eyes left or right, and hope for the best. He was, with no shadow of doubt, the colour purple. No, the silence seemed to go on forever, until those nauseating, terrifying words crept through the air and whipped me up from the small of my back into a petrified statue-like position. Well, Francis, do you agree with him? I didn't know what I knew, where I was, what was I going to do, but I decided to be as positive as I possibly could and said, I know, sir, and with that all hell broke loose. I could tell by his quick turn of foot to the right he was in for a stick. Buckley being contributed had already cleared the first row I was in for the front door. I levitated myself up out of the second row. I cleared the front row, and I got my foot stuck in the back of the desk and was thrown over, my head hanging to the ground, my backside up in the air like a sugar loaf mountain. I was done for. And I knew what was coming next, and I left myself well armed. Well, it never happened. It was either divine intervention or a desperate need to survive. But out of my mouth came, childhood! Silence followed. It came again, childhood! I was an automatic pilot who couldn't stop. Childhood! Ah! And I didn't pull myself up, right? Till I saw Buckley creeping back in the door, heard the rest of the boys in the class uproariously laughing, and I didn't stop chanting till I heard the Naas himself joining in the laughter. And that's one good reason why I'll never forget my childhood.
Slowly I wander through scenes of my childhood. They call back to memory those happy days of yore. Gone are the old folk, the house stands deserted, no light in the window, no welcome at the door. Here's where the children play games on the heaven. Here's where they say, there we go, song to burn. Where are they now? Some of them, some have gone. No more to their home shall those children return. Lonely is the house now, and lonely the woodland. The children have wandered, the old folk are gone. Why stand I here like a ghost, like a shadow? This time I was moving, this time I passed down. I ran 62, I was 16, so held next door. We just wanted to rock and roll forevermore. We were rock and roll kids, rock and roll, oh yeah. Listening to those songs on the radio.
course, teaching nowadays is a totally different kettle of fish. It can be any one of a dozen different things on any given day. I spent 40 years in Vietnam, getting up, struggling to get up to 3 alarms, drinking 2 cups of coffee, smoking several cigarettes, and being the gate before the bell rang. My journey to school might take 25 to 40 minutes. And that time I go through the schedule for the day. I'd smile if I realised you were going swimming. Or if the drama teacher was in for a stint, or maybe if the RSA were in at advice. And I found then if I thought I had a difficult maths group ahead. If we were breaking into new territory maybe with the Irish language, or if it dawned on me that we had crow park hours afterwards, and I wouldn't be home until 5 p.m. Every day it had its ups and downs, ranging from the difficult child to the difficult lessons to the difficult class. And the small break along with the lunch break came as a welcome relief to most teachers. Here was you could go in, you could sit down, you could shoot the breeze and say it just like it was. But of course, it's not like that nowadays. But everything you say has to be carefully weighed. It has to be hidden in whisper tones, or just not say it at all. But in my time, things were different. I remember coming into the staff room one time, and one of the teachers was carrying the school mobile that he had on the speaker. And as he spooned the coffee into his mouth, the mobile rang. And he pressed the answer button, spooning the coffee, and I said, very politely, said, yes. And this high-pitched, elderly sounding lady came on the line saying, is that the primary school I'm on to? It is indeed, ma'am. What can I do for you? Well, she said, I'm out here on the main road, and I've just seen Brother Tommy's cock out on the bridge. Oh, says he must have a very long cock then, because I'm looking at him straight in the face here, man. But I tell you what, I'll pass on the message straight away and he knocked off the door with the uproarious laughter of the entire staff room. No one laughing louder than Brother Tommy himself, who was a teaching brother in the school. I kept pins and the copper at the back. I should add, I suppose, that both the monastery and the school, adjacent to each other, they were 150 yards from the bridge. But anyway, you know, when we were Gossames going to school, we heard stories from classes in days gone by, and it somehow mitigated our own circumstances and made our little troubles in life maybe a little bit more bearable, particularly when it came to the writing of essays in Irish or in English. There was a story one time where the master that we had in 6th class had another class a number of years previously, and he asked them to write an essay on the crow in Irish, calling it On Breakdown. Now, when the master said a 2-page essay, he meant 2-page essay. Now, you could write 3 or 4 if you wanted to, but you didn't write any less. Now, the process then was you went home, you wrote the essay, you brought it in class the following morning, and you read it in front of the class when you were called upon, so that you were judged not only by the master but by your peers as well. Now, halfway through this process, there was you either see the chap as most unfortunate or a bright star. But one Polly Murphy stood up to read his essay, and this is how it went. On playground. The crow. There on playground. The crow said, ka 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 every day. No. He had little pages as well. But how the master might have used this doesn't dare to be. Now, in the same class, perhaps, or maybe a different class, a number of years later, when they were in secondary school, the headmistress of the all-boys school had asked them to write an essay. Now, I had no idea what the title of the essay was, but there's a good chance that the author of the essay is here in the audience with us tonight. And should he choose to reveal himself, he might fill us into details at the break, or maybe if he's still here, that is. Anyway, the process here then was that you went home, you wrote your essay, you brought it in, that the headmistress collected the copies, she brought them home, she spent the night correcting them. She brought them in the following day with her, she had a big stack of copies in front of her. And she sat down, and what she did then was that she went through the copy, she had a cursory look, she closed the copy and she called out the name, and you passed the copy down through the class. Now, okay, what happened was, she was halfway through her pile, halfway through the stack, when she seemed to come to a long stop, what we call a full stop. And it was not just a cursory look, she seemed to be reading this. She seemed to be reading that over again. And she says, Tooher, stand up, please. So Tooher stood up. This might have been unusual on the day. She says, Tooher, I read this essay last night, and it made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. No, I'm not reading it again, and it still makes no sense to me. What did you say that, Tooher? Well, that made sense to me when I wrote it. It doesn't bear thinking about what the headmistress went about. But, you know, I learned during my career that, you know, you can very easily believe your own publicity. I had a great third class student, and I believed that they had benefited enormously from doing Irish through drama, competing at a national level, and winning. Now, top of the class was a little Palestinian girl, and I reckoned she was going to be the next Penn Sayers. But anyway, it was the day of the holidays, and I had them lined up in the corridor. It was the summer holidays, and ready to leave them into the arms of their loving parents, waiting patiently in the arm. When they sat together, they got to be boisterous. Of course, with the thought of 2 months of freedom ahead of them, like, why wouldn't they? And I had to call over. So I said, voice in the line, please, which they would have heard again as, Cuna Selina Lavudon. No, it was a day, that's a daily and manifold daily instruction for the Irish primary school. And it was at this point that little Kay, who was at the front line, piped up and says, come to the scale of water. Excuse me, please, sir. Yes, says I. She says, who's Selina? I said, well, sir, every day you want us to go, you only talk to Selina. I said, no, Selina in the past. And at that, the bell rang, they rang, the penny dropped, and I was left devastated. For those of you not too familiar with the Irish language, Selina means in line, and has nothing at all to do with that famous singer. Anyway, you know, listening, you know, making mistakes, listening to banter, carrying on, having the crack, all parts of the education process. But sometimes, just sometimes, matters can be completely out of your control. I was asked to do a passion play one time for the newly appointed bishop in our area. There was song singing, and it was with my all boys 6th class. There was song singing, there was wailing women, there was the hammering, and there was the quote from in here and there. In front of an audience of gathered parents, a dozen or more priests from the parish, several brothers, the principal with his invited dignitaries, and his lordship. Sitting up there in the front row, resplendent in his robes, following all the action, unfortunately, with intense focus. Now, all was going well. All was going well until Jesus decided he had enough. And unscripted came down off the cross. Now, most of the audience could see the humour in this aberration. But it was quite clear to me that it did not, and I would have to intervene. In fairness to the Roman soldiers, the centurion, and all the apostles, they were urging Jesus to go back to the cross. Even his own mother, Mary, and the But also no there. He seemed not to hear that piece. Jesus just was being played by a child called Pam. He was a big hefty young fella, a lovely head of red curly hair on him, and very, very popular amongst his peers, but not gifted with any great thirst for learning. Now, apart from him, his two arms and two shelves either side of him on the stage wall, with his backside up against it, he had one line. Yeah, he'd get to the living. So, in fairness to the audience, and the principal wasn't rubbing his chin and looking down at his shoes, doing his best, I believe, to hide his true feelings. Likewise, the audience did their best to maintain their decorum. But the bishop now wasn't being involved. A big frown on his face. And following all the action in this old-fashioned presentation with seemingly more interest than ever, I put myself up on the stage in between the Roman soldiers and a happy person who was happy to throw dice for his own clothes. And says, do you not remember something that Jesus went through? Yes, sir. And do you know how he was able to do that? No, sir. And he was able to do that because he was as tough as old boots. Just like you, Pat. He was as tough as old boots. No, would you not, please, would you not go back up the cross? Just for another couple of minutes, and we can finish it off, and we can all go and have a break. All right, folks, says he, without hesitation. And up he gets. The big neck is swinging all around him. He goes off the wall, right? Left hand on one shelf, right hand on the other shelf. And in as loud a voice as he could possibly muster says, "It is accomplished!" And the bishop or no bishop, the entire audience erupted in thunderous applause, uproarious laughter, and a memory that would last a lifetime. It was accomplished. All's well that ends well. My final little anecdote. It's highly unlikely that this would take place in this year. I know for a fact it would not take place in this day and age. But again, as I said before, in my time things were different. We can often assume, that if we continue with teaching at the primary level, that the children aren't tuned into subtext of what's going on at any particular point in time. But then again, there are times when they become great prodigals. I had a student in my class one time, and being somewhat, available to do our little jobs, I was called upon by the principal to supervise another class for 15 or 20 minutes while the teacher was meeting there, which I readily agreed to. He also added, he was in a hurry, he was heading off, that there was a prospective new pupil in the class that day, expressing a great interest in our pipe and brass band, and that perhaps I could sell the merits of blowing a trumpet, filling a bagpipe, or banging a drum. Because, he said, in other words, be a good impression. Because he says, our numbers are low, and we could do with everyone that we could get. So I had that class previous year. So I was quite happy to go up to renew old acquaintances, and perhaps make a new one. So off I went to engage in a chat. And as I opened the door to the classroom, I usually spotted the new pupil. The back facing it, a long head of flowing blonde hair down to the small back facing it. And I decided to grab the bull by the horns. Now, I quite went to the family and welcome back from the rest of the class with the volume of my own voice and said, "Whoa! Who's this lovely looking girl here? I'm a boy!" Came the quick answer. And as she turned around, I realized, yes, indeed, it was a boy. The expected explosion from the class never came. And before I had time to dig an even bigger hole for myself, the young fella says, "Are you the trumpet guy?" I said, "I am indeed," with a huge sigh of relief. And the rest is history. He finished his primary education in our place and blew trumpet till he did so. But what keeps this anecdote in my head is not just the terrible mistake that I had made, but the fact that it was absolutely acceptable by the class, and it is not always appropriate to have a cheap laugh or a goof off at someone else's mistake. I could be cynical and say it was fear of the teacher that had previously that kept it quiet, but I prefer to give credit where credit is due. Mull and Organ on the stupid shape. All's well that ends well. Thank you very much.
This next song is an original that I put the music to and Frank put the words to. Back in 2016 we wrote a 1916 commemorative show and we performed it, the kids performed it, and this is a song called Freedom Cause. Freedom calls, the price to pay, where children fall. Pray for children, fill on day, innocent soldiers going away. Some stray bullet right through the head. Sean Francis Foster in his Miami lives day. 1916, freedom calls, rally to the flag of red and long. Only 13 and looking for fun. Some mother's daughter, some mother's son. Pray for children, fill on day. Innocent soldiers going away. Some stray bullet right through the head. Sean Francis Foster in his pram, he lies dead. Freedom calls for the children. One Peter, no John, Grafton Street, in a mother's arms, a mother's seat. Pray for children, fill on the day. Innocent soldiers running away. Some stray bullet right through the head. Sean Francis Foster in his grave, he lies dead.
But unfortunately, it doesn't always As a young man, I was very conflicted with what I wanted to do with my life. I never saw myself as a career teacher. It was something it was a bit like recitations. It was something I felt. I got the call, went to college, saw that the ratio was 7 to 1, government support. Went missing for a day. When I got to Junior Rex, spent it in the Department of Justice. Didn't like it. Ran back to the 7 to 1 ratio. And 3 years later, was appointed as principal teacher on the island of Inishbrook. The only teacher on the island. 2 weeks later, that didn't do well. And before the end of the month, I found myself in another island cottage home. And, you know, a good colleague of mine once said, after seeing me take several career breaks, that I'd never settle anywhere. But he was wrong. I wanted bright lights, plenty of excitement, and a certain oblivion. Having a man uncle living in Canada, with close ties to the Sutherlands, the Michael Caines, and the Louis of this world, didn't help. I was sure I had stars in my eyes. And it wasn't until all those stars were completely clouded over by my addictive consumption of alcohol that I finally came back down to earth and embraced the day job with, I suppose, a newfound enthusiasm and perhaps an appreciation of the simple things in life. It was during one of these career breaks I was in Dublin, teaching. I was actually attending the Gate School of Acting, working in Slattery's bar, Rathmines, part-time, and teaching in the grade school during the day. I spent the better part of 2 years living this lifestyle, and in the naive belief that I was about to be appointed to a permanent position in that school, resigned my post in Kirke and landed on my ass in Dublin. Someone else got the job. But and despite the fact that I had spent 2 years with another teacher in the school, building up a pipe and brass band, had brought them onto the Late Show, which with Gay Byrne, had brought my own class then to the All-Ireland finals of Kildare with a dramatic presentation of Maeve August on Torv, or Maeve and the Bull, if you like, had paraded then Uachtaráin Ahare and Mary Robinson into the opening festival of Kildare with our pipe and brass band. They still didn't give me the job. But I wasn't too disappointed. I was still in that area of flux, and so I more as an escape than anything else. And continued my aforementioned lifestyle, but I was now teaching in a junior school in Ballymun for just a few days when I got the call. It was perhaps early to mid-September, not sure. It was my partner in crime, the pipe and brass band, informing me that a gossoon I had in the class the previous year had died tragically in a road accident with a lorry, and he would be buried the following day. He was perhaps 9 or 10 years of age. And, after unexpected protracted negotiations with the vice principal in my new school, that I had only been there for a few days, I found myself able to make the burial, but only able to make the service beforehand. Now, at the time, I was mobile on a push bike that I had inherited from a friend who was on his way to America looking for work. And after talking to several people, getting several directions over several hours, you see, the taller of my two brother-in-laws, he's down there somewhere, has always maintained that anyone from my family of origin is geographically dyslexic. And he wanted mine too. But I reckon I could pedal my way from Ballymun to the graveyard the following day. Now, no more than any other young man of my generation, image was important. And as I pedaled through the city, my long trench coat trailing behind, revealing my knee-high, colourful cowboy boots, and my Stetson hat glued onto my head, with the long hair flowing behind, the big bushy beard, I might have looked like anything but a primary school teacher. maybe I was trying to disguise that, I don't know. But after taking several wrong turns, going up numerous cul-de-sacs, sweating profusely, I finally arrived at the graveyard. Parked my bike up against the wall and prayed to God that I wasn't too late. I wasn't. There was a huge crowd gathered. Someone said afterwards there were over 1,000 people in the graveyard. And it might have been true too, because it was quite obvious to me I was going to get nowhere near the graveside, wherever that was. So I took up position outside the main gate of the graveyard. Now the graveyard itself seemed to ascend to a height, maybe 20 or 40 metres, over quite a long distance. Now when I did notice, as soon as I arrived, was the silence. You could hear a pin drop. It didn't appear as if any prayers were being said. And certainly there was no whispering going on. And I was very careful that I didn't make an awful clatter when I put my bike up against the wall. But after what seemed like a while, it was probably only seconds, I noticed movement on the height. It was my partner in crime with the pipe and brass band making his way towards the main gate. Now, he was a very tall man, and although he was great crack to be with, he had a very intimidating presence, and certainly no one that knew him would be standing in his way. So he wasn't going to have any difficulty in making his way through the throng. And I presumed then that something had occurred at the graveside, or that something had been forgotten. But I was happy enough to think that he could see me from where I was, from the height, and that he would be able to tell the family and the teaching staff that I had been present, should I fail him to meet him afterwards. In fact, we were so familiar with each other that I to avoid making eye contact with him, I turned out towards the main road like that. And it was in that position that I felt someone grab my right elbow in a voice that quick and whisper in my ear, "Who wanted at the graveside?" I didn't know. Incredulity. I said, it was himself, standing there, tall. I could see his wispy hair blowing in the wind, his right hand touching both sides of his jacket, and his left hand holding my right elbow in a voice like, for what? Says I. He says, "I have no idea, but I'm not proceeding without you." And before I knew it, he had me processed through the front gate of the graveyard. It was pointless to resist, he was too strong. But after about 50, 60 meters, I stopped, forcing him back towards me. And in a very agitated whisper, he says, "What?" I said, look. I've gone through the whole script of Maeve and the Bull, the dramatic presentation that we had put on for the All-Ireland final. With my clan. I said, I've gone through the whole cast. I just can't picture the child's face. "Well, of course you can't," says he. "Why?" says I, astonished at this discovery. "Because he was inside the arse end of the bull." And the child's face came into my vision. And as another reference. We went on 50 or 60 more meters at the moment. And he himself pulled up. And again, I couldn't believe what was happening. I began to think, is this real? Am I here? Is he here? Is this all in my head? Or what? And I now felt that I was the one in charge. And I said, "For God's sake, man, you pull yourself together. Where are you ready? What's wrong with you?" And he says, I wasn't surprised, I was shocked. He was in a fit of giggles, which he was prone to. And I said, "What's wrong with you?" He says, "They all think you're the lorry driver." Oh, God. And I looked over at the trench coat and the cowboy and the Stetson, and for once, just for once in my life, I wanted to look like everybody else. It's too late. The graveside came into view, the little white coffin. Grief-stricken family and teaching staff. He paraded me up to the side of the grave like a private bull. Finally left go and leaving go of that iron grip. I don't know what I said, if indeed I said that. The whole, apart from what I'm telling you here tonight, the whole incident is a blur, total blur. But what I do remember is Father's tear-driven face. And he says, "Sir Kirke, you had a wonderful year in your class last year. And I was hoping you'd help me to lay him to rest." Again, I have no idea how I might have said that. I presume I said it was his trouble. But he gently lifted one end of the coffin. I lifted the other end, and we laid him to rest. I never met the family yet. After that, I left Dublin. And anyway, I felt I would never have the great words to say. It was an honour, without doubt, the greatest honour that could ever be bestowed on me as a teacher or a human being. The only tune I ever composed on that night was in his honour. And it's called After. It starts very slowly, recalling the sadness of his teacher. And then, quite quickly, goes up into a mad tempo, recalling the crack, the fun, and that he had operating inside the accent of the road. Here's the tune. It's called Here on Bar.
now give you James Tooher, Alex Hughes, Francis Tooher, and the second act called by Captain Bonnie.
Kid handling juice box was playing away down the tree. Back at the bar in the soda game sat Dangerous down. And they were watching his look. Was his light of love? The lady, known as Lou. When out of the night, which was 50 below, and into the din of the day, there stumbled a miner fresh from the creeks. Dark, no. He looked like a man with a foot in the grave and scarcely the strength allows. But he tinted a poke of dust on the bar and called for drinks for that. There was no good place to strangers' face. We stopped ourselves for a clue. But we drank his health, and the last drink was Dangerous down the crew. There's men that some man was hold your eyes and hold hard like a spell, and such was seen, it seemed to be like a man who lived in hell, where he faced most hair and the dreary stare, the dog whose day is done. As he was with the green stuff in his glass, and the drops fell one by one, then I got to figuring who he was and wondering what to do. And I turned my head, and there looking at him was the lady that's known as Lou. His eyes went roving around the room. He seemed in a sort of daze, till at last the old piano came in the way of his wandering days. The ragtime kid was having a drink. There was no one else in the stool. So the stranger stumbled across the room and he flopped down there like a fool in the buckskin shirt that was glazed with dirt. He sat and I saw him sway. And he clutched the keys with his talon hands. My God, but that man could play. Have you ever been to the great alone where the wind is awful still, and the icy mountains hang you in and the silence you both could hear? With only the cry of a timber wolf in noon camp there in the cold, half-dead things, stark dead world, clean made for that muck called gold. Whilst high overhead, green, yellow and red, the northern lights streaming and dark, and you have a hunch what the music meant. Hunger, night, and the stars. But hunger not the belly kind that's banished with bacon and beans, but the gnawing hunger of lonely men for a home and all that it means. For a fireside far from the cares of our four walls and a roof above, but also cramful of cosy joy and crowned with a woman's love, a woman dearer than all the world, and true as heaven is true. Look how ghastly she looks through her painted rouge, the lady is known as Lou. And all of a sudden the music changed. So soft, you scarce could hear, but you felt your life had been looted for your all that it once held dear. That someone had stolen the woman you loved, that her love was a devil's lie, that your guts were gone and the best for you was to crawl away and die. It was an awing cry of heart's despair, and it thrilled you true and true. I guess I'll make it a spread his hair, said Dangerous down the room. The music almost died away. Then it burst like a pent-up flood, and it seemed to say, repay, repay, and my eyes were blind with flood. And the talk came back with an ancient wrong, and stung like a frozen lash, and the lust awoke to kill, and the music died with a crash. The stranger turned, and his eyes they burned, and his lips went in a sort of grin. And then he began to speak. "And boys," says he, "you don't know me, and I'm accused of dead, but I want to stick to my woods straight, and I bit my boat there true. The one of you's a hammer here, and that one's damn road." I ducked my head, the lights went out. 2 guns blazed in the dark. The lights went up, the woman screamed. 2 men, they stiff and stark, pitched on his head, pump full of lead, lay dangerous down the road. And the man from the creeks lay clutched to the breast of the lady that's known as Lou. Now these are the simple facts of the case, and I guess I ought to know. They say the stranger was crazed with hooch, and I'm not denying it so. I'm not as smart as the lawyer guys, but strictly between us, 72. The lady that kissed him and pinched his pub was the lady that's known as Lou. Thank you very much. That story always reminds me of a story of youth. In our small parish in North Cork. I say small, but you know, something tells me it was one of the bigger parishes in the diocese of Kirke. Yeah, figure that one out. But anyway, we had a parish priest once called Canon. Now he was very tall, austere looking man, and went everywhere with his walk. But for all of his appearance, this man had a great sense of humour. He had his own very comfortable armchair on the left side of the balcony in our local cinema. And I didn't let him get blackguarding or tomfoolery that went on behind him in the smoke-filled tiered seats ceased once he made his entrance. I had the privilege then of every other Saturday morning of travelling to the train station with my cousin who owned the cinema in his lobby to collect the film and advertising reels for the following week's viewing. And subsequently, I would help him load the film from the cans onto the 2 cameras. Now this involved an endless turning of the wheel. And every now and again, my cousin would say, "Stop, stop, stop!" And he'd take scissors and he would snip. He would snip the film strip. And he was a tall man with his long arms. He would whip a substantial amount of footage. He'd snip it again, drop it to the floor. He'd reattach both ends and tell me, "Continue." So I would. I overheard him say one time it had something to do with closing time in the pubs. Anyway, I remember one time, you know, one of these advertising films was for Guinness. And if the film wasn't going great, according to my cousin who was operating the camera, he would very often put on, he had 2 cameras, he'd switch cameras, and he'd put on this advertising. It was for Guinness. And as soon as he put it on, I'm not sure about the camera, but as soon as he put it on, the entire audience would erupt in the chorus of drink, 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 da 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 da, drink, drink, and that would go on until he had enough with it and back to the film again. Now, the canon and my cousin, they seemed to have a very healthy relationship. Both were men of the world, and both had a keen sense of humour. On one occasion, I crossed the street from my old house, which was directly opposite the cinema, and with my cousin one Saturday afternoon, and there was the canon looking at the very large display window and the poster of the week that had gone. I remember it well because it was Rackle Welsh in one remaining year's BBC, wearing a very small, Neolithic looking bra, and thus exposing quite a bit of cleavage. The ensuing conversation then between my cousin and the canon seemed to go on for quite a while. I wasn't able to overhear it, but the following Sunday morning, as my older sister and I crossed the street to sell newspapers from the same premises before the early going mass chorus left the church, I saw the post. Rackle now sported a very modest looking one-piece blouse with nothing neolithic whatsoever about it. And on closer inspection, I could see the fine lines that were drawn by the black marks. Supposedly very custom. Very disappointing. But, you know, what they thought about the film strips and the posters indeed when they reached Kildare. My cousin was very proud of the fact that he got all the films and the posters before Kildare, but of course we were before them on the railway line. But what they thought of the film strips and indeed the posters when they reached Kildare, one will never know. But to the best of my knowledge, Bandolero, which came out in 1968, underwent the same fate. And we're back to the canon. The canon had two beautiful red setter dogs. One was certainly called Bran, and I can only assume then that the other dog was called Skjolor, after Phil Cole's 200 dogs. Now, I being a senior altar boy, I was appointed to feed the two animals before early morning mass every morning. This was an unenviable task. And what I had to do, and I remember about it, is at the back of the presbytery there was a very large food waste bin, always full to the brim. And on top of this there was a yellow plastic bowl. It was my job then to dip the bowl into the food waste, bring it to the kindle's office opposite. Now it was quite impossible not to get some of the mixture on your hands. And to this day I can still smell the mixture. I can also remember the canon peering out through the net windows of the back of the monastery. Now, I often wonder, was he having a good laugh? Or was he making sure I was doing the job properly? But whatever, a trip to Gaelic to intervene, I was relieved of the job, thankfully, never to return. Now, in the evenings, the canon would walk around our local park. And sometimes he would be accompanied by my father. But no, my father wasn't very religious or anything like that, but he did seem to have a great appetite for religious history. So I can only assume that their conversations were interesting. Now, at the time, my father had a very serious heart condition and was being attended to by a local doctor. Again, lovely man with a great sense of humour. Everyone I know in parish seems to have a great sense of humour. Or maybe I can only remember the funny ones. I don't know. But anyway, this doctor owned a very large BMW 1000 motorbike. And as he had reason to attend Limerick Regional Hospital every other Friday, would see me up the road at home and pick me up. The only condition was I could never tell my mother. So other reasons had to be conjectured as to why my hair was always tousled, my eyes were always bloodshot. And of course my mother came to her own conclusions, which were never in my favour. It so happened then on one occasion, when the doctor was attending my father, I brought the doctor downstairs to our home, walked him along the corridor, and as I opened the door, there outside stood the canon. Of course, he had spotted the motorbike and knew that his name was. And as soon as I opened the door, the canon turned in his wheel, on his heel, and tapping his cane, he looked straight at the doctor and said, "Good doctor, I think you best make haste. There's been a shootout in the Malpaso." No, I was shocked when I heard this shootout in the Malpaso. When I looked at the doctor, he just stood there with kind of a royal grin in his face. And I just I couldn't understand. And he gingerly went to his motorbike, put on his helmet, and his ease went up the top. Now, Malpaso was a small town in our small town with a very big reputation. Now, it was called after Clint Eastwood's film company. And above the main entrance, outside, were three very colourful depictions, and they're still there today, of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Inside, on the latrine wall, were etchings, slogans, graffiti. Perhaps not of the Bansky standard, but clear enough in their social and political messaging. It was run alone by a soccerman gent who was a fountain of knowledge on every subject, particularly soccer. But whatever brawl had burst out in the Malpaso, I can assure you that no firearms were to the best of my knowledge, no one was seriously injured. And certainly, there was no one named stiff and stark. It might say a lot about the Malpasser, but I have heard very recently the Malpasser had a reputation of having lots of fun and games of various sorts during drinking hours, and some of these games involved water pistols. It mightn't say an awful lot about the Malpasser, but it does say an awful lot about the humour of Canon Brown. Thank you very much. This one now is another song by Jeremiah McCauley. The love song. It's called Rosie. Thanks,
Know where she comes from, you look for the sky. So much of the woman, yeah, one of the boys. She can cuddle the kitten and then kick the cat. Such a mixture of different emotions. One day seems shorter than mine. She's a little bit dumb. More than a little bit smarter than me.
When I see a stand-up comedian leading his entire nation into battle, it must, for me, surely appreciate the value of humour in life. My father was a northern man. My mother, a southern woman. How that union might have been viewed in 1950s Ireland, I have no idea. But three words do come to mind: suspicion, courage, and humour. Life can't have been easy for anyone north of the border in 1950s Ireland. And to my belief, and only my belief, that humour was an essential ingredient in their survival. And it also has occurred to me that, surviving the famine, one way or another, and 700 years of British domination will surely take some degree of courage, of course, or humour, along with courage and everything else, of course. I say this because when I see emaciated bodies strewn across my TV screen every evening, needlessly starving, it makes me think of what our own people went through 45 to 47. I first crossed the border into the late 70s, early 80s, I'm not waiting the dates. But in my Armagh cousin Sean's car, we ran out of petrol. Somewhere around the lower and the upper Falls Road, I have no idea. But it was at a T junction. And as Sean exited the car to go to the boot to retrieve an empty petrol can, saying that he'd get petrol somewhere, I began to appreciate northern humour. Because as I looked over my left shoulder, there was a British soldier with a baby face and in a flak jacket beside him, taking up a fighting position on the left-hand side of the boat. As I looked over my right shoulder, there was another British soldier with a baby face and a flak jacket beside him, taking up another fighting position. Two more took up positions on the roof of the car, while Sean's gone for the petrol. Two more on the front of it as they were waiting at home opposite. This was my introduction to northern humour. And it does bring to mind the Chuckle Brothers. I heard the thing last Wednesday and it gave me quite a shock. I heard the world was going to end that day at 12 o'clock. And as I headed closely to confession and I began to wonder what this heaven might be like. Now, wouldn't it be wonderful when the world finally ends to see the Pope and Paisley at the back, best friends? But then there could be trouble at the end of Heaven's Day for when to come to close the bar. What anthem would they play? Now, Holly wants Soldier Song, the Irate would want to sing, the Pope would want One Day Love, I can't recall its name. The OUP and the DUP, at last day tonight, for they would want to hear the Queen, the last thing every night. So, in case there's any trouble in no general space, we've gathered all the poets up from all about the place. There'll be Wordsworth and Keats, myself and Shakespeare, and we'll all compose a version of the Queen and the Soldier Song. And then we'll all be happy up there with night and day. And we did Gaelic every Sunday. The DUP would let us play. We did Gaelic every Sunday, and it's really an arm on no. We'd be the first to win the Salmon Lyre 5 times in a row. Thank you very much. That's one of hundreds of pieces of humorous poetry written by Seamus, the late Seamus McCauley. Shane McCauley, the band went proud to say it was my first book. But Shane and I had in common was drinking. When we first met each other in the late 70s, early 80s, it was at a family wedding in Donegal. And as he viewed me across the living room floor for the first time, he was at pains through his lifetime to tell me how disappointed he was. Because all he saw was I was dressed in a nice two-piece suit. I had a full-length cashmere coat on me, and all it said to Shane was school teacher. But believe you me, after 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pints, okay, that image totally disappeared. Shane had an infectious since June. And it was when I first left the comfort of the Free State and crossed the border, it was one of the first things that took me aback, this infectious sense of flu. They sent him off to Brussels with his Bible stuck onto his clothes. And he said, when I get over there, I'll have them on their poles. He was MP for Kirke, and the cheers were on his way. In the Parliament in Europe, he was going to have his say. Well, he made history at the opening over there in Brussels town. He said, the flag of my country is upside down. John Taylor and John Hughes said, sit down. That's near how. And remember, you're not in McCauley now. But back home in Kildare, his wee wife sat all alone. For she was sick and sad and tired, waiting for her big man. And one day, she was at the dentist, and he removed one of her teeth. And he inquired how she was feeling the next day upon the street. He asked how she was feeling. He said, how is it? She said, he's over there in Brussels roaring in the barn about the south. Now he's just as famous as Arctic in the Stout. And there's a name for him in Brussels. He's called the Irish Brussels Sprout. Now, when I first took this vineyard, I looked at the date, and after I looked, I said, there's something about that date. And then it struck me. The anniversary of JFK's assassination. And I feel it would be remiss of me not at least, from myself, not to mention. My uncle Naturally worked as a tailor in Long Island. His wife, Brina, worked as a nurse in New York Hospital. And they sent us home parcels, a couple of times a year, particularly Christmas, toys, comics, clothes, bric-a-brac, sweets. And they also sent us home, or brought home, a copy of the Warren Report, which was the official report of the assassination of JFK. And my siblings and I would spend hours looking at this book. It was at home. Pictures of Caroline, Jacqueline, Bobby, and then we had Lee and Harry Oswald, and you had Jack Ruby, and then on the 20th of July, my birthday, 1969, man landed on the moon, and we watched it on black and white TV. And I, for one, I was full of enthusiasm. I was full of enthusiasm to investigate this enigma that was the USA. But no longer, all has changed. A terrible something.
This next song is called Tried, and it's on my own. And I wrote it. Immigrants out with a smile suggesting indigenous people belong. We left these shores and we pride on them all over the world. This is the universe, we are a fact, but you must stay out of town. It's not that simple, bankers will never look at the chaos they cause. Take your identity back from the land. Take your belongings away from that flag. Fear brings the same old hymns, history repeats itself, fascism, power, and greed. Lunatics leading, this internet's bleeding, propaganda like never before. Every extreme has a polar reflection, religion, opinions, and politics. Left-wing ideals, right-wing traditions, stop waiting for your turn to talk. Take your belongings away from that flag. Take your identity back from the land. We're
my paternal roots being in Kildare, hospital in Tooher. There's somewhat of a link up between my next piece and the land down under. Father John O'Brien, with his book Around the Holy Log, is based mainly in Australia. His real name was Patrick, from which the piece comes from. His real name was Patrick Joseph Hartigan, and he spent his final days ministering in Sydney, where he's laid to rest. Now, 60 years prior to this, my great-grand-uncle Thomas Donaghy was entombed in Melbourne Cemetery. He was Dean of St. Patrick's Cathedral, Melbourne, and I had the pleasure last February, in the company of the current Dean, Monsignor Stuart Hall, of touching his tombstone, which is under Nita Mausoleum in Melbourne Cemetery, and leaving it to him. To say that he was a very humble man, most charitable, and a really gentleman to the poor, would probably be a gross understatement. Now, Mikey Devlin was a primary school teacher in Cullyhanna, possibly in County Ireland. And he was well remembered by my father, and he may well also have taught the late Cardinal O'Fee, who was also a relation. The curious thing about Michael Devlin is he could well be responsible for this night's entertainment, if you like to see it like that. Because the words up there along the hillside, and Bob would never have come into my father's domain, but for his tuition. Now, religion has always been an intrinsic part of life in the north and in the south. And when I first went north of the border and went to Naas there, what I noticed was it was always a silent collection, and not the jingle jangle type that I was used to down something. Now, finally, before I deliver the piece, Father Pat Howley was a relation on my mother's side, and he also ministered in Australia all his life. He was a confessor to Bob Hall, and he came home in 81. I think I have that date right, 81 or 82, to visit his sister Breda, my auntie Breda, and he wrote out this piece for me, and he gave it. And he also gave me a black joke. Now, this priest gave me black joke. I love that black joke. It has nothing to do with anything. I just thought I have to say, I haven't got it anymore. It's gone. It was a long time ago. But anyway, the bishop stood in Lord of the state with purple cap sublime and galvanized the open bush church at conference coronation time, and all the kids were mustered up from 50 miles around, with Sunday clothes and staring eyes, and ignorance profound. Now was it grace, or was it fate, whereby they yarded to an overgrown two-story lad from Tang the land lived? Oh, a hefty son of virgin soil, where nature has its fling, and grows the trefoil 3 feet high and maxed in the spring, where mighty hills uplift their heads to pierce the white king's rim, and trees sprout up 100 feet before they shoot a limb, where everything is big and grand, and men are giants too. But Christian knowledge waits, alas, in Tang the land blue. The bishop someday stirs up, as bishops sometimes can. He cast a searching glance around and fixed upon his man, big, glum, and low, but unsmade to every bout his man. And he seemed to think that he was there, but he wasn't sure of that. The bishop gave a scornful look, as bishops sometimes do, and glared right through the pagan in from Tangalangaloo. "Come down, me boy," his lordship said, in crushing tones severe. "Come tell me, why is Christmas Day the greatest of the year? How is it that around the world we celebrate that day and write a name upon the cards of those who are away? How is it wandering ones return with smiles and greeting too?" When a small of knowledge came the lad from Tangalangaloo, he gave a lunch with set shape, faces on the shelves. He knocked benches all askew, upending of himself. But oh, please, the lordship was. Now he smiled to say, "That's good, my boy. Come tell me now, and what is Christmas Day?" Well, the ready answer, bare fact, no bishop ever knew. "'Tis the day before the races out in Tangalangaloo."
you're always on the run. When I open door to all and I'll castle, I shall be at your wings, get from President Curtin King. I'm happy I'm your baby, so hey, sir! I will roll to what we made, sure I'll take you out with me. Come here to say I'm past your idle time. Idle time! Today was my thought, saying you will get deal. And the old man had the money for the time.